Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Impossible to Inevitable podcast. Today is an unbelievable session. You've got one of my heroes, mentors, friends, brothers, warriors with us today. And so I'm really excited to invite Bob Alpigini to join us. Bob has done it all, multiple lifetimes in one. He was ahead of me at the Naval Academy, so I followed a couple years behind him. He was 96, I was 98. Went to Harvard, was fast selected, like ahead of grade in the military for all of his jobs, which is how we got to work together. As they picked him up, we needed an expert to do the things that we knew the SEALs would not be able to do. So we pulled in the best of the best. He came in. We worked very closely together for 3 years at Devron 1. And then went on to command. We had a chance to work together. He's got an amazing wife, a huge fan of marrying up, amazing family. And in general, like he is the manifestation of taking the impossible and making the inevitable. So Bob, welcome.
Thanks, Kurt. Great to be with you. Um, I'll correct one thing. Although I may have been ahead of you numerically at the Naval Academy by a couple of years, there's no being ahead of Kurt in anything. So even then, admiring from a distance.
So Bob, you've had so many different instances in your life where you have done what would have appeared to anyone else to be impossible and made that inevitable. What's the thing that was most alive for you? That was the most, what was a challenge that existed for you? That was something that over time, what did you do to overcome and to make it obviously inevitable and that's now in your past? But what's one of many of those or several of those?
Geez, lots of things. My daughter asked me yesterday. I had a nice little date with my 12-year-old, and she was probing into Dad's background, as 12-year-olds will do, and she asked me, Dad, what was something embarrassing that you did? I immediately turned red and about 50 things came to mind. And so I told her probably the least dangerous of all of them, but that probably would be unsatisfying for this conversation.
And
Um,
ideally, Katie saved you as she always does.
as she always does, cleaning up behind to make sure Dad talks himself back out of the hole that he talked himself into. But for in the grand scheme, I think we all have challenges along the way, and we all set goals for ourselves. And um, I have had profound moments in life, these markers that said this is the direction that you were supposed to go. Um, and being raised Catholic and taught by Jesuits, um, is a very Ignatian thing to light the world on fire. And when you know the direction you're supposed to go, you head in that direction, and figure it out as you go. When I was about 16, I always knew that I wanted to serve in the military. Since I was a little kid, we have a history of military service in the family for generations. It was something that always interested me. And when I was 16, I visited the Naval Academy for the first time, because I was exploring, what are these things and what might I be interested in. Um, and it was one of those moments. It's one of those things that I knew then and there that that was the place that I needed to be, not necessarily because of the what comes with going to the Naval Academy, kind of the shiny object, isn't that cool? But much more to do with what it represents in the path to the bigger picture, to military service and to leadership, and what I want it to be in the longer term. Um, so I set a course right then when I was 16 and said, this is the direction that I'm going to go. And like all voyages, mine was probably more of the Odyssey than it was the Love Boat, um, or Gilligan's Island. So the journey started right then. And so when I got back to Philadelphia, I refocused myself and my academics and my athletics and what direction I was heading. Um, and I got nominated to go to the Naval Academy, but I didn't get picked up to go to the Naval Academy. I got sent to Naval Academy Prep School, which is not unconventional. It's something that the Navy, all the academies use, and a lot of colleges use prep schools to give you a fifth year of academic boost, but also for um, recruited athletes. It's a way of doing kind of a redshirt year, because the academies don't have the convenience of keeping athletes for 5 years like most uh, Division one type schools too for sports. So anyway, off to Naval Academy Prep School. What you do when you're there is you're actually enlisted in the Navy as a very junior enlisted. And the academy also is made up about 50%. The Naval Academy Prep School is made up about 50% of prior enlisted sailors coming out of the fleet, usually pretty smart young people who enlisted, went to nuke school, distinguished themselves out in the fleet, both the Marine Corps and the Navy, and applied to go to the Naval Academy and get accepted. And so this is also an avenue for them to get reintegrated into an academic environment for a year. So it's very much a mix of recently graduated high school kids and somewhat more seasoned young sailors and Marines. Um, as a very very young 18-year-old, barely out of my 17ness, I discovered in this journey that I was not academically ready for it, nor was I mature enough for the what I was being thrust into. And there's also a portion of that where, as a young enlisted sailor, you are on your own. You are being paid to be there. Your weekends are completely yours, and if you choose to go hang out with the 21-year-olds when you're 18 years old, then that's on you. And so there's a lot of fun that comes with that, but ultimately you pay a price. And the price for me came at the very, very end, when days before graduation, I was notified that I would not be going to the Naval Academy for a lethal mix of conduct and academic underachievement, and just lack of maturity. I was told I would not be going on to the Naval Academy, and that was devastating. And I wasn't alone. There was, a decent sized group that just happened to be a lot of the same people that I hung out with, um, burning the opportunity away throughout the year. So we all learned together. And so you immediately shifted out of your Naval Academy prep school uniform and into standard junior enlisted dungarees. And later on that day, we were marched over because a ceiling in an auditorium had taken rain and the plaster had collapsed and fallen all over the desks that our former classmates were about to go sit in. So we were marched over to go clean up that plaster off the desks. And as we came back out from that, all of our former classmates were standing, getting ready to go into those chairs that we just cleaned off. And it was fundamentally humiliating, to, from the morning to the afternoon, go from top of the world to bottom of the world. And so that was another moment of those profound things of, I know this is not the right direction. This is exactly opposite of what I want to be doing. Um, and so back to Philadelphia I went, with my sea bag in hand, and I had no idea what I was actually going to do next. Um, and it's easy to get very insulated and kind of um, stuck in your own rut on that, and that's exactly what I did. But I have had a very, very strong mother, who was, my best friend, throughout her life. And after giving me an adequate period of mourning, of maybe a week, she came in and she said,
Mhm.
"Okay, we're done with this now, right? We're moving on. Let's go figure this out." And the plural soundingness of that was not really plural. It was her supporting me and me figuring it out as it should be. And so then began the dial a college process, which now it's June, before the next college semester, and I am without any idea what I'm going to do for the fall of 2000, or sorry, 1991. Um, so I called a few of the schools that I had originally gotten into, and got the, geez, sorry kid, too late, or maybe next year. And then came another one of those profound moments where had reached out to Villanova University, which was not too far from where I grew up. And I talked to the admissions office and explained the situation, and they said, "Well, let us talk to the director of admissions, and maybe you'll get a call back." So I thought pretty much that wasn't going to happen. The next day, the phone rang, and I just happened to answer it. And again, because if there's anything my mother also taught me, it was how to speak properly. And so when I when I answered the phone, um, the voice on the other end asked for Robert Alpigini. And I responded, "This is he." And that voice on the other end said, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe that there's somebody your age who actually knows how to speak English properly without any prompting." I'm the director of admissions, the dean of admissions for Villanova. And I also used to be the chair of the English department. And how you speak is music to my ears. I understand your situation as it's been described to me. We know what Naval Academy Prep School is. We already had your transcripts, and we're happy to accept you into the class of what would have been 1995, which was stunning to me, absolutely stunning. Villanova was no small school to shake a stick at, and so then began the next phase of the journey, the coming back, um, and all because I answered the phone properly, I like to say. Um,
And this is to me
and
the beauty of the podcast, the beauty of dropping in with the intent to serve others, because I have seen Bob lead in the most unbelievable circumstances and do what has been impossible for anyone else. And I had no idea this story existed. I mean, this is amazing. I had no idea. I just assumed what most people assume, that your life was good and it was great and it was awesome. You were on this vertical trajectory that just can continue to shoot toward the heavens.
Nope. And that's one of the things I speak with. I do a program for a local high school, um, where a lot of the speakers are focused on career pieces, and this is really kind of the more real piece that life is rarely ever linear, and being prepared for what are leaping off points and go figure it out times, and what does the future hold, and being a good person is going to serve the purpose of what you are here for. Um, and so off to Villanova I went. Um, and as a rower, I joined the crew team, and it was a really, really great bunch of people on that team and tremendous coaches. And I really fell in love with it. And I fell in love with Villanova, and I have lifelong friends that I made out of that experience. Um, and I had this ridiculous course load that I subconsciously put on myself because somewhere in my head I thought, well, maybe just in case, I'll stack myself with a crazy course load that if I do decide I want to reapply to the Naval Academy. Well, by Christmas time, I had realized as much as I loved college life and the Villanova family that I had been surrounded with, it wasn't what I was meant to do. I wanted to do something else. So I took all that and I reapplied to the Naval Academy. I reached out and I found out that regular college is actually a little bit easier when you don't have military requirements. You've gotten a little more mature. You figured out how to balance life a little bit more. And you've been encouraged by people who love you to go pursue your dreams. And so I was accepted to the Naval Academy and off I went, now joining the class in 1996, 2 years after what would have been my class.
Thank heavens.
But
You would have been gone and I would have never met you.
I know, I know, I would have been one of those guys. Um, and so off I went, and the first day at the Naval Academy, known as I Day, it's day, your first day of indoctrination, is often, they shave your head and, put you in a new uniform, and your parents are out there and everybody's crying. There was nobody crying in my family. If they were, it was tears of joy. And my departed grandfather, who was a Navy veteran, was there. And it was an incredible moment for me because it was smiles. And um, I remember, my I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I said thank you. And you don't technically expect to see your family until at least Thanksgiving again. So it's a long, long period. But there were no goodbyes. It was thank you. And into the building I went and chopped up the stairs and immediately got stopped by a upperclassman in his beautiful white uniform and got dropped for a push up. And I remember that very first push up and, you know, down on the floor and looking over, and that guy had this big honking gold ring that he received probably, 2 months before, and looking at that thing and saying, I'm going to get one of those things, and actually modeled my ring exactly off of that ring that guy had.
Oh, it's
But just
fantastic.
banging out 20 push-ups with a smile on my face because it was where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do, and launched all the rest of the things that happened over the next 30 years.
Unbelievable. And I had no idea. Again, like the assumption from the outside is like, oh, Bob just dominates everything he does. Which from that lesson, I've seen you run the streak since. I mean, you and I have talked a lot about leadership. One of my favorite definitions of leadership is people will only surrender their independence to you if they'll get to a greater outcome they get to on their own. And you told me once, and I'll let you take it over from here. But in command, when you were in command of a ship, really you need command for, I think you said, like 2 or 3 moments. And and I would love for you to unpack that, because I remember thinking, oh, that is the difference. The difference between that moment where something is impossible and you convert it into the outcome that is the exponential increase, or you're seconds away from devastating collapse. And so I loved your insight on that. If you'd unpack that for everyone, because to me it was so powerful and you shared it.
Yeah. So that thanks for homing in on that, because that is really, really important takeaway. As you're Yeah, I was inspired to command a ship when I was a brand new ensign, after I'd graduated and gone to the fleet, and had gone to this great ship that was a incredible team built from the ground up. It was a brand new ship, so it hadn't gone to sea yet. So every single person on there was there from the time the ship was built to the time it hit the water to the time it deployed. And I had just an incredible commanding officer and executive officer, the number one and number two on the ship, who inspired me, and the other officers on that ship, that this is a career that I wanted to have. And now, moving through that leadership continuum, but also um, learned along the way that that commanding officer position, that role, um, which is so critical, it's absolutely critical. But the sum of when it is critical comes down to about 3 minutes over the course of a year and a half or 2 years. When you put all the pieces together, that are the moments that only the commanding officer can affect. There's no one else with the experience or the authority, um, or the respect, or the trust, or a combination of those pieces to bring the team together to impact and affect an outcome. We put it all together, it's only about 3 minutes. The whole rest of the time is building the team, influencing the team, setting the example, so that that trust and respect is built mutually across everybody on the team. And we had a lot of experience with that when you and I worked together in Special World. But in the conventional world, when I got to that piece of it, when I got to command a ship, which was one of the greatest honors of my life, probably second only to marrying the woman of my dreams and building the family that we did together, was commanding exactly marrying up. Um, was the honor of commanding a ship, and so I commanded USS Stout, um, Arleigh class destroyer, DDG 55. Um, and we were sent on a mission, um, that we were anticipating we were going to be deploying for around 6 months. And that all changed due to politics and circumstances around the world, where we were told, you're going to leave early, you're going to run rapidly from your home port in Norfolk, Virginia, and be in the Eastern Mediterranean, and you need to be there in 5 days. And if you do the math on that, that is a very, very long distance. And what's required in order to do the time distance on that is to um, go at flank speed, which is the highest speed the ship will go from the time you clear the breakwater to get out to the ocean, all the way to the time you get on station. And the Atlantic Ocean is a very big thing, that gets a vote in how fast you can go at any given point without tearing the ship apart. And then when you get into the Mediterranean, there's shipping traffic, and it's a whole nother story. But nonetheless, the direction, the command, and the requirement was to, for this national mission, was to be in the Eastern Mediterranean, ready to fight, in 5.5 days total, when you put all the hours together. So, the crew got ready. There were some last minute twists and turns, that included not only the crew of the ship, but also the maintenance team, on the shore side, all the civilians and all the contractors who do all the things to get the ship ready, who did some last minute magic to make sure we were absolutely ready to fight. So off we went. Said goodbye to our families for what we expected to be 6 months, and ended up being 10 months. and we started screaming across the sea. In this circumstance, the probably most important people on board are the guys who, the men and women, the sailors who keep the engines running, um, and manage the fuel.
And flank speed for everybody else. I've got four LM 2500, so four gas turbine engines on a boat that are now rocketing the ship across the ocean.
Yeah, for the motorheads out there, that's 105,000 shaft horsepower. It's a phenomenal amount of power, and you are screaming through across the ocean. Um, and the way the time distance worked out, um, we arrived at the Strait of Gibraltar at about 10 o'clock at night, about 2200, to begin our transit through the very complicated and narrow Strait of Gibraltar, which from the time you enter the traffic scheme to the time you come out the other side is, I want to say, about a 3 hour transit. And all through that, it's narrow, and by narrow, I mean just a few miles wide, and the actual shipping channel is far more narrow than that. And there's ships going in both directions, but then there are ferries and other container ships going from Africa to Europe and Europe to Africa and back and forth, and they're cutting across the lanes. And then, of course, there's fishing boats who the best fishing happens to be in the middle of the channel. And they assume that you're going to go around them, no matter how physically impossible that is. So there's lots and lots of obstacles along the way. It's some sort of an 80s video game without a doubt. So
Frogger.
it is Frogger. It is Frogger. Yeah. Um, when you prepare for this piece of the transit, you put a lot of thought into it. You check the charts, and everybody on the team is familiar who's going to be on the navigation team and the officer of the deck, the team that drives the ship, and in the combat information center that is down below that backs you up with all the radar data. The whole team has studied the plan. I've laid out the plan as the commanding officer to say this is what we're going to do. We're going to continue to function. We're going to move at 25 at the flank speed through there for the whole thick of the 25-mile transit, and then on both sides of that. So we're not slowing down for any of this. It is pitch black out because why would you want moonlight to help you out? And so it is just a lot of little lights and a lot of moving objects out there. So we talked through all the contingencies, and I selected a watch bill, the team itself, based on who was most experienced and who most qualified to be on that team, from across the entire ship. And then you prepare the ship for what you call restricted maneuvering, which is when you know that you won't be able to deviate. So you're prepared for damage control, and you have the anchor ready to drop in case something goes horribly wrong, and you have to drop the anchor to stop yourself immediately. So everybody's ready for everything. And then you have a security team in case by chance some terrorist organization has learned that you're passing through the Strait of Gibraltar.
At this
So
point,
every
you've been steaming for what, 3.5 days straight.
Yeah, yeah, nonstop
So
and
there's
getting beat up.
fatigue involved as well. And
Tons of fatigue.
for anyone
Yeah.
that thinks it's super awesome to watch like Miami Vice and like going really fast, it's awesome for about 30 minutes. And then and then there's the rest of the time.
Yeah, pretty rough. So the crew's pretty beat up. Everybody's exhausted, but there's an exhilaration that comes with getting up for the game, for
Doing the thing.
this piece of it. This is a really intensive piece of it. So off we go to begin the transit. I've got the top teams, and our teams arrayed exactly as I would want them to be. And this gets to that piece, and that's all administrative. Honestly, any commanding officer or anyone within the chain probably could have organized the team the same way. Me signing off on it, me saying, let's move that guy for that guy. That's fine, but that's not the CO is not the only person who can do that. Um, Now we're moving towards those moments that only the CO, and the training and experience and background and trust and respect come together. Um, so I made a point always that when I was on the bridge of the ship, the captain has his own chair, his or her own chair on the right side, on the starboard side, and the executive officer, the number two, has one on the port side. Um, I was typically, well, the XO rarely would sit in his chair. The XO was usually moving around, which is the nature of the executive officer's job. Um, Whereas the commanding officer, I always sat in my chair and stayed in my chair and um, allowed the team to function to do exactly what it is their job is to do. And if I had a concern, then I would lean over and I'd pull in the senior officer of the deck and I'd say, hey, let's make sure we're paying attention to something, or let's make an adjustment somewhere, or get me additional information. But I would never leave my chair. Um,
And for everyone else, like
unless
the captain is the god at sea. I mean, this chair is epic. It's elevated, and it really is the presence. When I've talked about on the helicopter, when you give that head nod, my life and yours of mine, you have the field there. When the captain is in that chair, then that's the presence of, hey, this is now the Conn team. This is now the team that's driving the ship on behalf of the 300 plus members of this crew. Here's whatever, Bob, 12, whatever. Here's a number that are now driving and have the hold the fate of everyone else.
yeah, I think that's a good depiction. Um, and so the point of being in the chair and staying in the chair was that if the captain is out of the chair, then there's something abnormal going on. And that's when it's time and attention goes to the captain. Everyone's listening and paying attention. And so maintaining the value and the discipline that comes with that, no matter how nervous I was, in a circumstance, I knew there was very few things that would get me up out of the chair to then have to move to the center of the ship. Well, during this transit, we are again continuing at flank speed. We're passing through the strait. We've made our approach to it. There are ships, large container ships that are moving slower than us, and we're moving, functioning within the international rules of the road for how you function at sea to pass these ships and continue on our transit at that flank speed, do so safely and respectfully of all the other mariners at sea, not hazard anybody else, keep an eye out for all those fishing boats. So there's constant maneuvering, constant looking ahead, paying attention to the radars, correlating with eyeballs using binoculars and looking to see what is that light right there. Oh, that correlates to this contact right here, and then talking to the team down below in the Combat Information Center to make sure how we're perceiving it matches how they're perceiving it, and is there any other information available. So the whole team working together to create a common operational picture, everything that's out there, so that you can visualize what it is and how you have to operate in that environment. So we made it through the narrowest part, in the narrowest part of the channel, and we're moving through, and it's beginning to widen a bit, but you're still restricted by the size of the channel. But you could see the team easing up a little bit and thinking, "Phew, okay, all right." Um, but I'm looking um, off to the coast of Africa. And I'm watching this one particular light that I can see, and having reviewed the charts earlier, I knew that there was a ferry station there that ferried passengers from the African coast to over to Spain. And so I was paying attention to it and correlated in my own mind and asked a couple questions and peeked over at the radar and saw that this vessel was getting underway and heading north. But then it moved parallel to the course to the channel, and so seemingly it wouldn't be a problem. And I made sure the officer of the deck is aware. Hey, you're watching that too, and we're paying attention. Um, and so we're going this way. The ferry was coming this way, and then they moved, and it's good safe distance off to the side. Um, and they're moving at probably about uh, 15 knots, and we're moving well in excess of that. So when you're in these situations, the geometry of it means that you have to maneuver quickly and well in advance to ensure that you're not going to risk collision. Um, so as this situation continued to develop, um, I was continuing to watch that particular vessel while paying attention to the other stuff, and the team was doing that. I made sure the officer deck was also watching. But then I saw an aspect change. I saw that ferry starting to change its direction, and I could see we're no longer looking at its stern. We start to see the side. the port side of it, which indicates it's going to do the least logical thing you could possibly do, which is cut directly in front of us. And maybe they didn't realize how fast we were going. I don't know. But this was that moment where, because of the rate of closure and what could likely occur, this is where I got out of my seat. Um, you know, in a deliberate manner, stepped out of my seat and moved to the center of the ship, to the center line of the ship. Um, and I asked the officer of the deck, who's the one responsible for the bridge team and is actually giving the commands to drive. Are you paying it? Do you see what's occurring? And he says, I think so, Captain, but think so isn't really the best answer. It's got to be a very firm yes, Captain, and I'm taking action, or no. So not to step on him, but what I did at that point was, okay, I'm gonna take over, and made the announcement to the team on the bridge. This is the captain. I have the con. And what those words mean is that I have taken the control over giving the commands for how to steer the ship. I've taken what is basically the baton away from the rest of the team, and said, my commands are the commands that you will be paying attention to. What I say is what we're going to do, so that there's absolute clarity and no confusion about what we're going to do. My executive officer, who was absolutely brilliant, and we had been teamed together, going back to our very origins on that very first ship, as well. And so we thought very much alike. So he knew when I got up what was going to occur. And so he had already started what he assumed was going to occur. Um, and I said, XO. He said, got it, Captain. And out the door, the XO went out to the bridge wing to look directly in back of us to make sure that there was no one following closely and that we were clear, because he knew what I was going to do. Um, and as soon as he said, we're clear, Captain, and now the ferry was in a full turn directly in front of us, and we were closing on it fast. Um, and so I gave the order, all stop, very calmly. And there was a moment of hesitation, and I turned my head, and not loud and not in any kind of manner to cause um, any anxiety by the team, said, all stop. And so the lee helmsman brought the ship to all stop. So immediately from all ahead flank to all stop, which takes time for the ship, because of the gross tonnage and the mass of it, to come to a stop.
And I forget, Bob, just
On
so people have a scale, how many tons is this ship?
Is a 10,000 ton, 505-foot long, um, the Porsche of warships. Um, Very powerful, but nonetheless a lot of tonnage
10,000
to
tons.
stop. 10,000 tons. But because of the brilliant design of the ship, you also have at your disposal that 105,000 shaft horsepower that can drive you ahead. You can shift it to instantly drive yourself backwards too. The blades on the propeller will shift in the opposite direction. And even though the shaft is still spinning, now that motion is turning the ship backwards. And so we went from all stop to all back full. And I didn't have to say it twice now that the team was in rhythm with what I was doing. And there was a little bit of terror as they're seeing the ferry coming directly in front of us, and we're all stop. And we're starting to drift into it. And then we start moving backwards away from it. And it's dead silence. And the anchoring team on the front of the ship is looking up at the ferry. They're, 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 which is,
So the
that's very
anchoring
close.
teams are the anchoring teams up in the front of the ship. So that obviously Bob's in
Yeah,
the command, up on
up
the
on the
top, but
right,
he's
up
up
on the
there in the
bridge.
very front. So it's so close that they're looking up at the ship.
Yes, they are literally the forwardmost people on the ship, standing almost on the boom, almost on the pointiest bow of the ship, looking up at this ferry that has decided to cross in front of us. And we are backing down, and then went all stop. And so now we stopped, and that ferry's crossing in front of us, and it was dead silence across the entire ship. There was no radio communications, no anything, as everyone just kind of stood in wonder of, oh God, that was close. The ferry cleared. We said, all ahead flank, right back to all ahead flank. And off we went. Um, and I turned to the officer of the deck and I said, Officer of the deck, Conn is back to you. And I went back to my chair and sat down. And the officer of the deck announced, "This is the officer of the deck. I have the con." And off we went. Um, and that was all told probably 45 seconds from the time I got out of my chair to the time we took the action, to the time I was, we had completed the action. And within, by the end of that minute, I was back in my chair, to restore the normalcy. But that action at that particular time was based on the dynamic of understanding the motion of the situation, but also the characteristics of the ship, and what the team needed to do in concert in order to make that happen very rapidly, because it wasn't just a few small commands and it was going to magically happen. There's a whole chain of things that happen behind the scenes. Um, and so off we went. And once we completed, it was about another hour, we completed the evolution. And so we debriefed, after any major evolution like that. We'll pull the team together, the key players, and we'll debrief, how the transit went. And so, we talked about the transit in general and then that specific moment, and kind of informed everybody this is what I was thinking at the time. Um, this is the motion that was going on, and this is the distances and the speeds that we were working with, so you understand, why I took the action that I did. Um, and out of that, two things came. One was my officer of the deck, who I had hand selected, who was a in fact recently in his career just completed command of his own ship. But he let me know, Captain, I don't see as well as night as at night as I think I do, as I think I did when I was younger, which would have been good to know at some point. But nonetheless, I said, "Thanks, Sean. That was good to know after the fact, because he was not perceiving the situation the same way I was because of the low light." And then the other was my lee helmsman, the person who was operating the throttles, was a 5'2", highly qualified, highly capable young female, Filipino sailor, and she was very short. And if you didn't know any better, you would think she was very meek, which she's not. But she could barely see over the console, so all she could see was this ship pulling in front of us. And she said to me afterwards, she said, "Captain, all I saw was that ship coming in front of us, and I knew that you were going to take care of us." And that moment was when I got to say to her, to that sailor, "I knew that you were going to take care of us," which is that moment where the moment requires the team to function together. And that team at that moment needs that captain. And there has to be that singular voice to say, this is the direction that we are going. And it's not to seize the power and hold the power, it's to create the opportunity, the direction, the sense of safety that's required, and then allow the team to do what the team is supposed to do beyond that. But that, episode was the coming together. It was a culmination of all of those pieces that for the previous year, and the years before that I was on that ship. We worked so hard to build that team, and that was the moment that I knew without a doubt. I already knew, I didn't have a ton of doubt about anything about that team. But that early point in the deployment, knew that the next 9.5 months was going to be extraordinary, and we were going to be highly successful, because that was the mentality that this team had, was to work together and to trust and respect, up the chain of command, but each other as well. And so that was an important moment in command. And
In life.
you
I
know,
mean,
in
unbelievable.
life,
And
in
for
life,
just for everyone, the essence of that. I mean, Bob is humbly relaying it, but to me, the super exciting thing is the complete faith and trust of, like I get chills when you say, "Hey, this is a captain, I have the con," and the energy and coherence with which he says it, right? If there's any uncertainty in his voice, the whole team starts to shake apart, right? But the fact that he held that coherent energy allows them to go, okay, much like she relayed, somebody's got it. I'm not sure what to do, but I can now do my part because I know that the overarching team is intact. And so, like, I mean, it's a miracle. And it's a tribute to everything you had done until that moment to get to that point. Because without, you said it's administrative, but in the end, every detail, every nuance, every person that was in the right seat at the right time was all pre-planned so that the moment the opportunity came or the crisis came, like you could respond and not react. And so to me, I love your cool coherence of here's exactly what we're going to do. And of course you don't get complete certainty, but in those fields you have to hold that complete clarity of here's what we're going to do. We don't get to know the outcome, but we get to know here's the actions that this team is going to take.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and these were, those lessons of how you get, I think I was at, the 18 or 19-year point of my career at that point, when I was in command. But all of those lessons are bricks stacked on top of each other. I think we had, the things that I learned when you and I worked together. Um, we built the Star Wars Cantina bar, as we call it, was an important lesson, and we can talk about that or not. It's up to you. But the idea of it's not who fits a particular mold, it's who's the best and who's going to function together to be the best team possible. And I learned that at the PhD level, working with you and those years that we did all that stuff to achieve incredible, incredible results from what was a motley gang of all the right people from all over the place.
No, and I absolutely want to go there. I wanted to start with the most concrete, coherent example of a team because now we're going to go into the more esoteric, right? And so,
Mm,
so Bob ran, it was command of the Special Projects Division, which is fundamentally everything nobody's figured out in time and in the history of time. Like we want them to figure it out, and so it was literally the dream team of the Star Wars Cantina bar of the best expert in every single domain. And the awesome thing about that is the diversity is extraordinary. The difficult part is everyone comes from a completely different context. I think we had 7 different agencies represented in where you're working at, and everyone came from a completely different context. And so it required a coherent leadership. And people always ask me, like, what's the difference between the SEALs and the development group? My general answer is in the SEALs, if someone says no, then you say, okay. In the development group, if someone says no, you say, who is they and what's their address? And it's that shift in perspective, which is, hey, there's nothing that's impossible. And it was the embodiment of, everything that you and I believe, which is, okay, if we didn't have a solution around the table, then we knew someone in the network did, or we knew, like, okay, who should be at the table that isn't. And when you shift from that perspective, and I remember one of the conversations, and I'll kick it over to you, was one of the early ones as we were forming the culture. There were a lot of the subject matter experts that were saying, no, you can't do that. And I remember, this is 15 years ago, I know for sure, because Connor was 2 at the time. And I remember saying, look, the next expert that tells me no, you're fired. Because it takes no qualifications to tell me no. My son is 2. He's in the no phase. He can sit in that seat and tell me no all day. What I want you to do is I want you to use all of your expertise to tell us how we could possibly get to yes. And then we will, as the commanders, decide what risks we're going to take or not. But to me, that was part of the fact, and you could see everyone shifted the culture with in that moment, like, oh, we're going to find a way. It may be high risk, and we'll then decide what risks we're going to take or not going to take. But we're not going to start with can't do that because it's never been done before.
mm. Yeah, I'm as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about who were some of the personalities and what were some of the backgrounds that brought that mentality to bear. We had a brilliant case officer who she had been around the block many times, and she had seen all the stupid happen at all levels, and it frustrated her. And the reason she was on our team was because she really, really, really wanted to bring to bear smart, capable, how to get around no, how to get over, beyond, past, under, get past no to, yeah, but this is what right looks like. Um, I think about our brilliant legal counsel that we had, who also would parachute in on a target, which is fascinating stories. Um, who their job was to look at what the law said, look at what the authorities were, and bring them together in such a way that we would walk in and say, "Hey, Mike, what we're trying to do is this." And then he would go into his legal factory, and all of his knowledge of what the operations were and what the capabilities of the unit were, and just a brilliant guy and a brilliant piece of the organization who were as important as any aspect of it and respected as any aspect of it. But the lawyers saying, this is, here are the boundaries, here are the edges, and there is a thou shall not pass this line, but you can go pretty much all the way up to this line. And that was all about getting to yes and getting to what's the end goal and how do we get there from here. Um, I think there was a great moment where there was a young, very young UAV expert sitting in the back of the room during a particular planning session who had to
UAV for
that point.
everyone else, unarmed or unmanned aerial vehicle.
Yeah, sorry. And so that young expert who had pretty much been written off as some you know, quiet kid in the back of the room, possibly on the spectrum, piped up with "Oh, well, we can do that," and provided all the data and all the information, all the how-to that in most other circumstances and probably, most other team environments would have been discounted or probably not even shown up because they weren't invited to the game. But they were invited for what that background was and then felt comfortable in the environment to say, I have something to contribute that is critical to this mission. And there's, 100 stories just like that of folks being brought in and being part of the team and feeling that they are a valued part of the team, which is as important as anything. Have a goal and also, to reach that common goal, having everyone feel that they are a valued member of the team. And I think that was one of those things that you don't think of those organizations as being particularly cerebral about how the leadership happens. You sometimes imagine because of Hollywood that it's a bunch of lugheads all beating each other up, but that's not how it actually works. It's a bunch of really, really brilliant people in that particular organization itself, wildly brilliant people coming together to think about not only what the answer is, but how to build the team to get to the answer, because you don't have to figure out everything yourself when there's other smart people to help you do that. And that was one of the great takeaways for me from working there that carried forward into the other aspects of leadership when I went back to the conventional Navy.
Well, and I didn't ask you in your command scenario, but you were the person, and I'd be in the middle of the night, you know, in despair at the end of my cycle, going, I don't know if I can do this, right? And so I remember you'd call back and it'd be, ridiculously late my time and ridiculously your time, East Coast, particularly as you moved into global operations and now operating from home, which was even harder because now you're working 24/7 from home when you're supposed to come home. But that the complete shift of impossible to Neville, just having someone else to pick up the call and go, yeah, that sounds hard. Let's go do that. I remember the countless conversations, calling back and like, I don't have an answer. And the difference in being, I've always heard if you're seen, heard, or understood by one other person, it changes everything. And it really gave me the fuel to then go into the next day with everything required based on like, okay, someone's got my back, right? Thousands of miles away, but like, we did the head nod and it was completely transformative. It was often easier in the immediacy of combat, right? Like, hey, we're all on this thing, we're doing it. But the infinitesimal courage that you displayed, as our friend Jordan loves to talk about, like it allowed, every single day, in building the culture of your team, building the culture of the team we worked on together, changed everything, right? The ability to feel seen, heard, understood, and know that someone's got our back in the most crazy, ridiculous environments.
Yeah, and those were heady days because from the seat that I was in, I didn't always know the details of what your day to day was, but I certainly knew the frustrations and the challenges of what you were trying to drive forward. And it wasn't until you would get back from a deployment or we were in a truly, truly classified environment that I could get the deep details. Sometimes you feel like, geez, Kurt, wow. To be faced with that all by yourself can be number one, isolating, and a single no is easy to say, we're going to work through that. 100 no's can be demoralizing. And so that um dyadic relationship, I think is the term, where those two leaders, those two elements, no matter where you're at, are able to support each other. And that's part of leadership is buttressing each other, being you are as well, not alone. Um, and you have a team and a teammate, whether they're standing next to you, getting off the helicopter at the same time, or at the other end of the radio, or in life, oftentimes that's your spouse or your brother or your mom, but that person who's your teammate, who is helping you think this through, not necessarily giving you the answer. I wasn't equipped to give you any of the answers to the hard
Oh, I
stuff that
remember plenty.
well, even a blind squirrel. But those relationships are as important as anything, because I think it's very lonely at the top and it can be very isolating in that command leadership position. And leadership happens at all levels, and it's easy to get isolated in your own zone of leadership, especially when you're white hot focused on serving the mission and achieving a particular outcome that a lot of people don't believe in, or don't believe in your ability to do that because, well, it's never been done before, or those authorities don't exist, or, well, that you're not a member of our team, so we're going to stop you from doing that, which is kind of part of that intergovernmental challenges too. But having those compatriots to lean on, and they happen both professionally and they absolutely happen personally. But who is your person, and who is that one who is going to help you as an influencer to keep on trucking, or to have the aha moment of this is how I get there from there, from where I'm at right now, or can you send me something, do something for me, that outreach that you're not alone, and we're going to figure this out together. That's an incredibly powerful relationship to have, and we're fortunate because we maintain it to this day.
Unbelievable blessing. So you've talked about, and I've watched the trajectory of mastery was the word that comes to mind of kind of every domain you have sought to engage in, across multiple different domains. As you look toward the future, I'm on my 50th lap around the sun at 49, so I'm fascinated. What do you see next, right? What is that thing that's on the horizon of where you're going to go, and how can anyone listening to this podcast help you in that mission?
Mm, that is a good one that I've pondered since we were out in San Francisco a couple weeks ago, catching up, and you soft posed that question then, and as I approach my 53rd rotation around the sun. That is an important question. There was a show years ago, called Northern Exposure, that I remember laughing at because there was this character who was celebrating. He was married to a very young woman, and he was lamenting. He was about to have his 50th birthday, and his life was half over, and he wasn't sure what he was going to do with the other half. I remember thinking it was so funny at the time. Well, now that I'm 53, I'm really thinking about what am I doing with the second half of my life, assuming the good Lord is going to grant me another 50 years. What am I doing to make the most of that, and to bring something valuable? Um, I I am not good at retirement. I have found since retiring from the Navy. Um,
I wouldn't have even attached that term to you.
I think I retired on Friday and was out at the next opportunity working with you the following Sunday. Um, so it's pretty much been that way ever since. But shifting gears from what has been the last 7 years of pursuing the more practical aspects of life, of kids growing up, family management stuff, lots and lots of swim meets, making sure to um, make the necessary salary and pieces along the way, and some marginally fulfilling jobs that are fine, but there's more to it. There's more to life, and there's more to be brought to the table. And I'm still in the shaping of what that actually means. And um, I get to reread in preparing for this conversation the Mary Oliver poem, "The Summer Day," and where she closes that with the question of what will I do with that one precious life. And it's just beautiful when you reread it in a kind of way that is a meditation. What does that mean? And you know, whether you're a deeply religious person or merely spiritual or um, merely thinking about life in general, it's a really, really great thought piece. And what I've found in the meditation on that poem in particular is that it's easy to stifle the question, to say that's a really hard question. Let me put that off to the side again. And you can put that side off to the side day after day, which becomes month after month, which becomes year after year, and then you're starting to chip into that, what am I doing? The actual do of the do, as opposed to the thinking about what you're doing. Um, and so, putting off the question, let alone coming up with the answer. So focusing on that, there is a element of my life that I enjoy more than any other aspect, and that is the growth and leadership piece. Um, it is bringing goodness to organizations. It is organizational growth and development, building teams. It is teaching teams how to be high performance teams, teaching teams how to themselves build higher performance teams, and the fundamentals behind that, kind of the secrets of having common goals and being part of a team and celebrating the journey and maintaining accountability and all the real pieces that work towards that. Um, I was a I started off at 14 years old in the sport that has become my lifetime sport, which is rowing. Um, and I've been involved in the sport of crew my entire life since then, either as a rower or as a coach. Sometimes it's just a fan. Um, and I do high school coaching now and some masters rowing now. And there's a golden thread that has run through all of it, which is a metaphor for life, which is the roles that happen within a boat. And in a cruise shell, you don't see the direction that you're going. You're not looking ahead. You're actually looking behind, trying to understand what's happening in front of you, while at the same time putting all your energy and propulsion technique into driving that boat forward. And when there's multiple people in a boat, then each person has a particular role within that. And you're making minor adjustments, and everyone is intent upon getting to the goal with the greatest efficiency and power together. So that is an incredibly powerful metaphor, not just the kinetics of it, but for what life is. So for me, that's a passion. And so turning that passion for that sport, the metaphor behind it, and leadership into something that is um, useful, not just at the day-to-day level or just a training level, but bringing it to a much larger medium is where I want to go, and figuring out, how what forum is that most useful to. So that's the piece of the journey I'm at right now at 53, is really figuring out where am I most useful in that sense. Where is that most needed, and how do we bring some of the things that have been highly successful over the years for really, really complicated missions, really, really complex environments to bear for the good of all.
All that comes to mind for me is my favorite show from when I was a kid, the A Team. If no one else can help, and if you can find him, Bob is the A Team. So it's revolutionized my life. So no, that's the lighthearted, but I love that, right? Because that has always been my experience of your superpower to provide certainty in uncertain environments and provide a path through a situation that otherwise there might be no path through.
Mhm.
Whether it's a ship that takes a J turn or a life that takes a J turn. So
Yeah.
I love that. Any other insights that'd be useful on how where you would like to explore that? Sounds like
Um,
coaching and guiding as a crew member is one golden thread.
yeah. So I think we are faced with a probably more tumultuous social, political, global environment now than we've probably seen in quite a while. And a lot of that has to do with divisiveness. It has to do with how information is consumed and how society, American society especially, perceives itself. Um, and I choosing not to get particularly political about it, but I think there's a perspective that comes with it that is helpful when you can step back and apply experience to it and say, is this real or is this not real? Um, what happens when you erase the divisiveness and point towards useful goals and useful achievements that serve a greater good? Um, that I think, in a larger sense, is worthy of applying skills to, of applying, when everyone catches their breath in the current environment and says, what does right actually look like? Um, I grew up probably just like you, as a big Star Wars fan. And I can remember being 5 years old and seeing Star Wars for the first time, and it being very clear of good versus evil, of who the good guys are, who the bad guys are. And I think when you're able to quiet your heart and look at what's the right way to treat people, what's what team do I want to be on? Um, in your heart of hearts, you can find that answer. And so, that's where applying for the good of the good is the best measure. And so finding that path as well is important to me. Again, as a Jesuit trained kid, the Ignatian principles and wanting to be a man for others is fundamentally important. Um, and that's something that I hope my own kids take away, because that, as a parent, you're always on a stage, and it's your actions is more so than your words that they'll remember. And that example is what I want to make sure that I set. Um, and that's important to me as much as anything.
I love that. And to me, you've always been the embodiment of what we learned from Admiral Stockdale at the Naval Academy of radical hope. I was pulling it up
Yes.
as you must never confuse faith that you'll prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they may be.
Yep. And there's no one who knew better than him.
Amazing. Well, thank you for your radical hope. Thank you for a radically epic impact in my life. And thank you for sharing your time away from your family.
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks for the opportunity to chat and spread some of the the great stories and experiences that we've had.
Awesome. Thank you.